Hello, people. Okay, getting used to my new setup, and I don't want to power blast my microphone, so I'm gonna try really hard not to. This week I read Insomnia by Stephen King, #1 bestseller, by the way. I didn't know what it was about when I grabbed it. It's Stephen King. You know he's the master of horror. You just give it a go. So I've never read this book. First time reading. And I got into it. So, what's my rating? It's hard to give a Stephen King book anything lower than a 4, to be honest. He does such a good job of writing. Personally, in a lot of his books, I don't like the end. Also, personally, I'm a big chicken, so I don't particularly like horror. But even with that said, I am hard-pressed to find one book that's not well-crafted for what it wants to be, delivers its message, etc., etc. Character development, the whole works. He's a great writer. So you're not going to find one, probably. Now, I haven't read a lot of the newer stuff. Maybe he got worse in his old age. I doubt it. So this is a 4 out of 5, a strong 4 out of 5. Here's how I'll say it, because I think this relates to both in sort of the same way. For casuals and for big-time readers, this isn't my first choice on Stephen King books, right? It actually isn't that scary. It's more fantasy. So, right, if you're a casual and you're not going to read a bunch of books anyway, this would not be my first choice. Like if I'm recommending a Stephen King book to people, this isn't my first Stephen King I would recommend. Now, if your casual friend or reader friend is a big chicken like I am and doesn't want a lot of horror, then absolutely recommend this one to them. But I think I'd go with like it before I'd read this one. All right, they're both going to be healthy reads. Which leads me into the next point. With Stephen King particularly, I don't remember where I read this. A professor might have told me. I think it was a professor. But it was Stephen King talking about his writing style. He said the page should have a lot of holes in it. Right? Now, what he means is literally lots of sentences. In this one, he'll do dashes here. He'll have a parentheses, this kind of thing, right? Things that break up the visual on the page, actually. Now, why am I bringing that up? Why does it matter? Well, it makes for, the way he does it, again, on top of what it's talking about, it makes for a very, very easy read. You'll eat through this faster than you realize. Even if you're a casual, a rank casual who doesn't like to read. Stephen King books are, and I don't mean in the sense that we don't have, let's say, high-end language. It doesn't need it, right? If it was written like Shakespeare, it would be out of place for what it is. It's getting its story across very well. You're coming to understand people you don't know, who aren't real, but then they feel real. And again, so then the things they go through start to matter to you. He does a great job of this in all of his books. This one's no exception. But it's extremely easy, airy, flows. You don't get tired, bogged down at all. Sort of the fun of a Stephen King book. Even like big blocks, even what looks like big blocks are made on purpose, I think, to strain you a little bit, to up the tension, this kind of thing. He does this structurally. His books are wonderful. So if you're a big-time reader, you got to grab at least one for that. Again, if that one I wouldn't pick as this one, because again, it's not horror like you think. But what is it? What's happening here? Okay. He sets a lot of his books, in dairy is it Pennsylvania or Connecticut? I don't remember. It's small town, northeast kind of area, picturesque looking areas. He likes this. I think this is where he's from. It works great for horror. It works great for a lot of stuff. So you start with a guy named Ralph, and he's having insomnia. He does a great job of, relating to you what's happening. I've never had insomnia. I don't know what that's like. I sleep like a baby. But he'll get across to you how it starts to suck you in, how it starts to take over your life in this kind of a way. It's such a small thing, but that if it's taken, it's so important, right? So, and the guy, his wife has recently died of cancer, and it's just a slow recession. And of course, he's older, which is also fun. A lot of stories grab in their prime people. It's interesting that everyone in this, the main characters, are retirees, 60, 70 years old. Not just in marriage. He's married, not just married, but he was married to this lady maybe 25 years, 30 years. Then she dies. He's had the grief. That's all, before the book really starts. And now he's dealt with the grief enough. And this new problem comes, right? This continuation of life. It really feels grounded, really feels real. Like these people. You could visit them. Even how interactions with friends, interactions with individuals. It should be boring to hear an old guy talk about how he can't go to sleep, right? But it carries you. It carries you through chunks of the book before anything actually really starts to happen. That's that writing. The writing pulls you along. So, of course, a lot of the early book is about the insomnia, describing it. He intercuts this with abortion, right? If you're going to pick a hot topic issue, politics, abortion, I'm like, it don't get much hotter than that one. This one was written, I think, in 97, 96, something like this. It was a hot topic, when was it? 94. It was a hot topic then. It's a hot topic now. It'll be a hot topic 20, 25 years from now. Now you say, I don't want politics. It doesn't come across as politics, but as how politics affects people, right? Here's a small town America. Everything seems fine. And next thing you know, people are at each other's throats. But it's Stephen King. So, right, it's a little more aggressive than you think it should be. And it starts to build that eeriness in you, right? He covers both sides. I don't get a sense of what Stephen King's opinion on abortion is after reading this. It's really character focused. How he leads. This character may want to stop baby killing. The other one's like, well, they'll use coat hangers. If they don't, this is a woman's right to her body. That right ends when you killing a baby. It's the argument. It's the argument right in the book, plopped in the middle of this man's, in the middle of his quaint little life. A guest speaker's going to come and give a big speech on pro-abortion. And the anti-abortion people are getting more and more riled up. So we intercut that with him not being able to sleep. There's a great line in here. And it's very true, weirdly, where he talks about him and a bunch of his old friends, literally old friends, 60, 70-year-old people, gather in a park and they'll play chess or talk, this kind of thing. He goes, politics is normally off topics, but even if you brought it up, no one really cares. It's almost like they age beyond caring about politics or anything in the world that's not related to some medical issue that they themselves are having or could have or fixes to them, right? That becomes their whole little world. I've noticed this from some old people where it's just like You know, there's a bomb that dropped in Egypt, and he's like, yeah, well, that bomb's not as bad as my gout. Right? This old people kind of get this way. And I think part of it is you're 70 years in, right? You've seen wars, you've seen ups, you've seen downs, you've eaten fun food, you've eaten no food. Good times, bad times, and by the end you're like, bro, I'm over all of it other than I wish I could go to sleep, which is Ralph's issue. Which is he could just, I just want to go to bed and sleep and wake up. Can't have it. So part of him, right? Part of his issue is that it drains him in a kind of a way. So things happen, and instead of like an alert, awake person going, whoa, he's like, am I going crazy because of the insomnia, or did I see what I thought I saw? Right? This kind of works against him. Right? So he's just going to a store, he's zoned out. Next thing he turns and sees a young woman, 25 probably, just beat to crap up. Domestic violence, right? Just drops on his lap. He is an old school kind of guy, which is another fun thing about this book. Back in the day, right? A housewife would be just a housewife. A husband went to work. He expected her to act a certain way, etc. We know the gender roles. It doesn't feel strained or out of place that our characters lean into those roles because they are of the age where that was important societally, if that makes sense, right? So when a danger comes and he wants the lady to move back, you don't see it as misogynistic. You see it as more truth in who Ralph is. He is that kind of a guy. The lady he's talking to is the kind who wants the guy to take charge in this spot. And so rather than it be a detriment or sidetracky or woke, it's develops the characters better. It doesn't mean she's useless when they pair up. It's him and another lady. What was her name? Lois. So we have this domestic violence. So we've already had abortion talk that's getting a little more heated. Arguments that normally aren't arguments. And then this random domestic violence, and we're seeing it from Ralph's perspective. So it's not, right? Us as the reader are kind of grabbing a little more than we need to because we know we got a Stephen King book. But we're never allowed to pull too far off down the track because Ralph cares about this lady beat the crap up. He's that kind of guy. Most people would, but Ralph particularly does. And it works for our story. So he's just sucked in. He sees this lady beat. She's holding her kid. It's hitting him right in the gut, so to speak. He calls the police, etc., etc. It affects Ralph. He goes to try and beat the husband up. And the husband gets all weird, talking about, centurions and the Crimson King. And, do you hear the voices yet? And do you see colors? He gets kind of loopy. So he's like, this man is insane. Which you'd have to be insane to beat up your wife. Take him to jail. We don't just leave the action either. We get a lot of time spent with Ralph digesting these things, right? And then not being able to digest them because he still can't sleep. It's a slow dough getting, kneaded. At a certain point, a pharmacist talks to him. Again, we use it as an excuse to walk the reader through issues of insomnia. How doctors might treat it, how they might misdiagnose it, how it might not help to go to a doctor, etc. He ends up getting a schedule for an acupuncturist, but somebody tells him, like, hey, don't go to that acupuncturist. And it's one of those weird things that's, again, it starts to unsettle your feet a little. He ends up not going, and around the same time, I think that night, he sees two guys come out of a neighbor's house carrying long pairs of scissors. He gets his binoculars and looks at them, and they're human, but not. They're wearing weird coats, matching. They're bald. He describes them as almost creepy mannequins, this kind of thing. And they just sort of talk and then walk off. He calls the police show up. They don't just leave then. It turns into a big deal. Apparently the lady inside died. But he has this knowledge of, these creepy guys that came out of the house. What's going on? Also with the backdrop of, did I really even see it? I was kind of sleepy. And from there, things sort of take off. And this is where our book turns more, I think, fantasy rather than horror. A lot of his books can really lean in and scare you. At least they scare me. I'm a big chicken. But this one leans more into the fantasy. Now, Stephen King himself has a kind of a extended universe where in his mind, I think he said this, now I'm not sure. I don't remember a particular article. I can't link an article to you saying he said this, but I think he has an extended universe where it's our world and then the spirit world and then some zone, some void out beyond it. And this void is where the monsters for his book come from, right? The clown from It is one of these monsters that made it to Earth. And it eats people. It kills people. It's vicious. That evil seeps in somehow. It has other books that fight against it. I think the Gunslinger series is a big one that fights against it. So I've read those now. Again, you can read this one without having read those, but they were coming to mind fairly quickly in the reading of this one. Our Ralph starts to see people's auras. A lot of talk about the auras. You can tell when someone's sick, lying. If he gets too close, he can almost start to tell their life. Now, our Ralph's also wrong a lot, right? So he'll constantly think some horrible things happen and then it doesn't happen. So he can read a truth, right? But he's not omnipotent. He doesn't have prophetic powers. It's a very fun way Stephen King limits it. In any case, he sees auras and he sees balloons over people's heads. Those become important, obviously. At some point, we have a third little guy that's clearly evil, disheveled, sharp teeth, vicious. And he gets the bad vibe from him. This guy cuts strings. Your string gets cut, Ralph knows instantly, almost like a dream state, that means you're going to die. That there's no way around it. And we get a lot then, second half of the book, is that concept worked through. Of auras, of other worlds. The way they describe it, again, a tower, which comes into play from the Gunslinger series. But they describe it as a tower of different levels. Are these dimensions? Maybe, probably, yes and no. Where, and this is a cool concept because it's not quite, right? So a religious is, it's you, it's your soul, there's heaven, there's hell. Right? Ooh. It's not quite, it grabs, sort of, but then not. Your heaven, your hell. These guys come and explain that it's not just there are levels of life, sort of existence, so that even after death, you can maybe exist in a kind of a way. And there are things that live above that existence and even higher up, past what our guys know. They never say, is there a God or not a God? It's more, at some level, there's the fates. At some level, there's like cause, effect, random, and purpose interplaying. At some levels above that, the entities may be trying to control it. You get the sense that if there's that dark void darkness, that there's some light that fights against it, and everything below it is in its wake. This kind of thing, right? It's very fun fantasy style, afterlife, conceptual kind of stuff. We sort of touch the fringes of it and then come back always to, he'll see someone, with a liver issue and it shows in their aura, and he'll show someone that looks like they're about to die, but their balloon string is just strong, so they're not even close to dying. We can move up levels, and then we're almost in like a spirit plane. Time moves faster. We can move through objects. This kind of thing starts to happen, right? Again, it's trippy, but he delivers it in such a drip way that you don't lose it. It feels appropriate. He's just getting to grips with it, and he meets Lois. Lois is another older lady who ends up having the same issue. The two of them. And he and you are relieved that someone else is experiencing this with him, because then that means he's not crazy. And then we move on into dealing with what we need to deal with. What we need to deal with is, the way they explain it is, there are certain people pivotal to certain sections, right? So random's random. You can't do anything about that. That's your Loki, right? This kind of touch of something to it, right? But there are other people, a Hitler, a Caesar. I think at some point they say that, like a Jesus Christ, where they aren't bound, and the things they do are such a monumental pull one way or the other that it affects higher up levels, right? It will affect the purpose. It'll affect the fates, however you want to see it. And one of these is going to be at is a child, but he's going to be at the speech the abortion lady is going to give. Abortion lady being the backdrop to everything. On the other side is abusive husband. His balloon's been cut, so he should be dead. That must work somewhere up on the chain as to, like when you trick the IRS or something. You don't count the way you normally would count, because he's a special case, unbound in a kind of a way. So anyone else trying to kill this kid, and the fates, the higher ups, the purpose, the strength beyond would intervene and make it so that's not possible. This is where, I was shot 3 times, but the bullets all missed. The building just missed falling on me. These weird quirks of luck that happen to certain people. You're Winston Churchill. You're Napoleon's, where the horses shot out from under them, but they don't die. Right? He tries to relate all those things to this higher purpose in the tower, is to keeping you alive because you're important for some reason. Whereas you still don't lose freedom of choice. Again, even the guys in the book can't explain how that particularly works, because they're not up to those levels. But this kid is one of these kids. And our abusive husband plans to crash a plane into the building of the abortion people and blow it up, which hits a little different in 94 as opposed to, after 9/11. A little bit spooky. In any case, it's cool how that just sort of amplifies, doesn't detract somehow. These good story elements find a way to reinvent themselves in a weird way in a lot of these good books. There's one part where our abusive husband, Ed, I believe, The abusive husband has a scarf with the word kamikaze written on it. And our evil guy, I forget his name. I think they name him after the three graces. Atropos. He will take something from you, right? So it's Stephen King's leaning into. You ever had like a favorite comb or a pair of sunglasses or something? Not major. Not, I didn't lose my iPad. Something little, but enough related to me. This guy will take something from you, and that marks you for him eventually coming and snipping your balloon and sending you, killing you. You're going to be put in a death bag when your aura just turns black, constricts on you, and then you're dead but don't know it. And then that's when you have a random heart attack or a brain aneurysm, right? He likes to, the book's trying to fold those random events into a cosmic purpose, right? So he says it without saying it, but our abusive husband, ends up with a kamikaze headband. Now, in World War II, the Japanese wore actual headbands, I think. I don't know. I think they might have said kamikaze. I'm not 100% sure, but they could have. At least that's how it played in my mind. So then I jumped to, did our Atropos take that, keep it, and then is it imbued with some kind of that mentality, right? What's that show on Sci-Fi back in the day? Warehouse 13. If you've ever seen that show, they get like, this is the pen Nikola Tesla used. So if you have it, your math equations, you can figure stuff out, and this tech company has it and shouldn't. So we need to go take it back and put it in safekeeping because the world can't handle these objects. That's the premise of the Warehouse 13. But I was kind of thinking of that when I read this, because I feel like the evil little guy, the Atropos, gave Ed this bandana to imbue him with the idea of kamikaze, right? It's a cool little subterranean concept in this book, because this Atropos guy has a dirty hell lair full of this crap, right? Full of crap he's taken from who knows how many thousands of years he's lived. He could have something from a Nazi. He could have something from a mass murderer. He could have some stuff from doctors. Who knows what kind of weird thing he could give people randomly that changes the course of their lives in weird ways. He's part of the random. Very cool. And I think that's part of the internal lore of the book, where the random is trying to have more control than it's supposed to, right? Random's supposed to be random, not purposeful. And this purpose is trying to do a thing that would be bad in the long run, right? If random has purpose, then what is purpose? Purpose becomes random, the world gets topsy-turvy, things don't work right. Or at least then there's too much chaos, right? I like that these elements, these ethereal elements, are at play in some kind of intelligent cosmic way. And now it turns out, again, I was bringing up Gunslinger, but it gets brought up in this book particularly. If you are a fan of the Gunslinger series, then this is actually a pretty good side book to read, because it deals with your characters. Apparently our kid is going to save somebody's life that will then affect our gunslinger. Our gunslinger is a guy in space somewhere. I believe he was trying to kill somebody who lives at the top of the tower. He's got to get to the tower. It's a big deal. He's a pretty cool gunslinger, though. I will say that. But I think the kid in this book will save one of his companions. He ends up with companions over the course of books, and he needs these companions collectively to take on the evil, set the world right, the universe, this kind of thing. So that was the kid's, that's what's so important. That's why this kid has to live. And he mentioned it flat out. He said he has a kid have a dream of a gunslinger. And it's the gun, he names him, I think he named it Roland. It's a full 100% tie-in to the Gunslinger series. I think in a weird way, it could make you interested in the Gunslinger if you're a fan of Stephen King or if you like his writing. If not, it's self-contained. If you've already read them, it's a fun and extra insight to know that these, the Stephen King extended universe, how far it sort of goes. But it flat mentions a tower, the Gunslinger. This relates to that. These people did these things to help that gunslinger, even without knowing it. It's a cool little tie-in. Now, I say I have an issue with his endings. I feel like Stephen King, he has a bit of an issue with it, and it kind of shows its head here. I want to say, right, a good chunk of it drags on a little more than it kind of needed to, right? By the end, I understand the concept. I understand what needs to happen. But we drag it. There's a little bit more descriptors than I needed. Again, it doesn't ruin it, but I think we could have lost about this much book and still been okay. We had like 3-4 endings where, like, if it ended here, it would work. After they saved the Civic Center, if it ended here, it would work. After, they had breakfast or whatever, spots it could have ended. Of course, it has to end with Ralph going to sleep. Ralph and this lady, the insomnia is cured, so to speak. The perfect ending for a book named Insomnia. There's an epilogue and a prologue, but I don't read epilogues and prologues. I'm weird like that. Also, for mass edition, there's pictures in it. Now, I don't know if Stephen King did these pictures or not. I wondered why, because they're pretty good. They're pretty good pictures on the whole. I wonder if Stephen King drew them. These mass print editions don't typically have pictures in them, right? And it was kind of weird to me because I'm like, well, there's not many. Oh, where's the other one? These mass print editions don't typically have pictures. And if you're going to have pictures, now I know it ups the price, ink and whatnot. If you're going to have a picture, why not have more? Right? No, he didn't draw them. They are David Johnson. David Johnson. Pretty good pictures, David. It was weird to me that in this big book there's 2 pictures. It's very random. And by this time, I'm pretty sure Stephen King is big enough. Even at 94, right? He was big enough that if he wanted 25 pictures in this, they're just going to put 25 pictures in. So he has some say in what's in that book, and he chose 2 pictures only. It's very odd. I wonder if it has something to do with your tie-in to the Gunslinger series. But it's been a hot second since I read it, and I never finished the Gunslinger series. I think there's a book or 2 left. So maybe I'll dig into those and check it out. I'm not exactly sure. But that's Insomnia. Fantasy more than horror. Didn't expect it. But it's a fun ride. And it's an easy ride. So anyone can read this book. Okay. Now it's time for ads. You can subscribe to this channel or you can not. These are my books, so that's my main focus. Is if you bought my books, then great, I'm very happy. If you get Kindle Unlimited and read my books, still happy. If you want to subscribe and just watch the videos, I'm also okay with that. If you don't want to subscribe and want to watch the videos, I suppose that's fine too. To each his own. But I don't, rather than like a subscription or get YouTube TV or whatever the other thing is they have, if you want to help the channel, I'll sell you a book, you'll own a book, and I'll be helped. I feel like that's a fair deal. Yes, fair. Okay. These are my books. I wrote these. I think they're great. Actually, I can't really tell what they are. A little bit too in the weeds. Too far in the, what is it? Too far in the forest to see the trees. I get a little cross-eyed. I just can't think of how I'd write them different. So, I'm going to go with that. Okay. I will talk to you lovely lot next week.